Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, we'll be taking a look at all the Covenant abilities available for Warlock on the Shadowlands Alpha in this current build. This is an alpha, so these abilities are probably going to change before the release of the game. But I want to take a look at these abilities, see what they're like, see what Blizzard has in store for what Warlocks can pick depending on the Covenant, and give you guys my opinions of which ones I like the most and which ones I like the least. I'll also be ranking these abilities at the end of the video. Just because I like an ability doesn't mean it'll be the strongest once this game releases. So I'm just gonna rank them based on the mechanics, so playstyles, or even visuals. And I'll also tell you which ones I thought were kind of bland, boring, or lame. I'm not really meaning to make an in-depth Warlock breakdown video on these abilities, but I am going to mention where I feel like some of these abilities will be good for dungeons, raids, or maybe PvP. Anyway, let's get into the Warlock Covenant abilities. The first ability we'll be taking a look at for Warlocks is going to be from my favorite, the Nectar Covenant. I'm a huge fan of the whole vampire and the aesthetics that the zone has, plus the bonus ability is quite nice. For Warlocks, you'll be playing with an ability called Impending Catastrophe, which is a 1-minute cooldown ability that conjures forth a cloud of chaotic anima that will slowly travel to the enemy, doing damage to enemies that it hits along the way. Once it connects with the target of choice, it'll do dot damage, it will do quite big explosive damage over time, and it'll also apply random curses to enemies upon reaching its final destination. The ability itself is actually quite awesome. First of all, from the looks of it, the massive ball of just miasma that you toss at the enemy, the way that you conjured it, I mean, it looks fantastic. I'm a huge fan of the Nectar abilities because they have this very interesting and visceral look to them. Huge fan of the way it looks. The ability itself does have a little bit of AoE component to it. It will do damage to enemies as it travels to the back of the room. So in a sense, if you have a boss surrounded by adds, if you can get a good angle, you'll be able to min-max the damage. The ability itself, with all the buffs that you can get as a Warlock, the cast time isn't really the longest, but it will be affected by gear, so 2 seconds is quite a long time, but applied with haste is really not that terrible. So for an ability on 1-minute cooldown, I feel like it does have a little bit of single target / cleave component. I think in PvP this could be an interesting ability to throw out at the enemy, and can be useful if you're throwing it into a pack of enemies, dropping down various curses on enemies. It is a little bit random, so it feels like it would fit the Destruction Warlock playstyle, especially as the mastery just randomly can increase damage of abilities just sporadically. Feels like a very cool ability with a fairly short cooldown that has multiple uses no matter which piece of content you want to engage with. The bonus ability that you get from Nectar is an ability to teleport your Warlock a short distance forward or anywhere you want to. This ability can be reused nicely for Warlock to find themselves in another area to reposition to. I actually am a huge fan because Warlock isn't a spec that's all that mobile, so this Nectar teleport on a minute cooldown could be quite good. So overall, if you're going for Nectar, it looks like the combination of both those abilities might be quite strong for Warlocks in Shadowlands. The next ability we'll be talking about is from the Fey Covenant, called Soul Rot. For an ability with the name of Soul Rot, you really wouldn't expect a very pretty blue effect from it, but that's what it looks like, at least currently on the alpha. This ability has a 1-minute cooldown and a 1.5 second cast, so it's fairly quick. You cast it at an enemy, withering away all life forces of your current target and nearby adds, so it'll be a dot that can be cleaved onto multiple enemies. It'll also make next drain life do a hell of a lot more damage for the next 8 seconds, and drain life will also tag every enemy infected by Soul Rot. So if you ever played back in Mists of Pandaria, I believe, you had mass drain from your life drain, where you could drain multiple enemies in a certain area, which was quite deadly for a Warlock in BGs, especially if you want to put yourself in the middle of all the melees, draining their life to sustain yourself. It used to do quite a bit of damage. We're not going to be able to use any of the traits we have currently in Battle for Azeroth. Otherwise, a Affliction Warlock with a couple traits to increase the damage of that life drain could have some incredible burst output. But this ability overall is fairly interesting. It does put a dot that does last quite a short time. However, this ability doesn't cost any mana. Instead, for this ability for Warlocks, it costs health, which is why it has this drain life component. Drain life will essentially, on a single target situation, you'll use Soul Rot to sacrifice health in order to put up this dot on the enemy, and then you'll drain life, and drain life should be able to heal you basically back to full. Though this ability itself has some single target potential, although the dot damage isn't the highest, the burst damage it offers with drain life is quite nice on a minute cooldown. I think where this ability will be best at is in terms of AoE trash packs, where you're able to maximize the damage of Drain Life, even if it's on 2 targets. A very interesting ability, and the sacrifice on health is an interesting nod to what Warlocks used to do back in the day, like how they used to sacrifice health in order to gain back mana with life tap. I do wonder how strong this ability will be. It so far seems to be like a really solid choice for cleave or AoE, and it seems kind of lacking for single target. Of course, Blizzard could adjust this in terms of how much damage it does per how many enemies it hits, so then it really tries to adjust for good single target, decent cleave, or decent AoE potential. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. That's just really for the balancing to take at a later time of Shadowlands. From the Fey Covenant, you get an ability to soul form yourself, or like transform your soul into that of a fox, essentially giving you a momentary use of Ghost Wolf. It essentially functions just like Ghost Wolf, but as soon as you use any other ability besides running and teleporting, which this ability lets you, you will be taken back into your Warlock form. So while you are in the soul form of a fox from the Fae, it does give you quite a bit of mobility, 30% extra movement speed increase, and it also gives you an ability to teleport forward, which can be also nice for repositioning. Yeah, especially if you're Affliction Warlock after you've done your job setting up all your dots, or as Demonology Warlock after you got all your pets and you need a quick moment to reposition to another area, popping into fox form and then teleporting over there very quickly can give you a little bit extra mobility. Again, Warlock is a class that just doesn't have way too much mobility, or barely any mobility compared to some of the other classes, so mobility is always going to be a nice touch, especially since you can just put your dots and forget them. Then we have the Nectar Lord ability, and this one I am a very huge fan of. It's a very interesting ability. It's a 2.5 second cast, so it takes a little bit at a 45 second cooldown, so a fairly short cooldown. Hurl a bolt of decimating magic at the enemy, doing a bunch of shadow damage and increasing the next 3 hits of your Incinerate, Shadow Bolt, or Drain Soul for the next few hits. Now this ability is really fun to play with, especially as Affliction Warlock. Drain Soul becomes like a very powerful channel ability that's able to literally drain the soul of my enemy. It really increases the impact of this ability. So in a sense, Decimating Bolt doesn't have as much cleave capability as some of the other abilities in this list, but the single target damage it puts up is quite nice. I really like the damage increase for the next Shadow Bolt, Incinerate, or Drain Soul that it offers, and it creates some bursty potential setups for specs that, like Affliction Warlock, isn't really all that bursty, or supposedly isn't normally bursty since it's a dot-based class. It also does allow Warlock to play with a certain few talents. For example, as Destruction Warlock, usually most of your damage will be done through Immolates and Cataclysms, but if you want to go Fire and Brimstone and fire off some very powerful Incinerates, that could give you quite a hefty amount of extra burst whenever needed. Or for Demonology Warlock, you can even stack a build where the more pets you have, the more damage your Shadow Bolt can do. So essentially that could be a really interesting combo to use together with Decimating Bolt. I think it's an interesting ability. I like the setup that it has, and the buff that it has for all your other abilities isn't on a timer. So once you use Decimating Bolt, you can find a proper time for you to use Drain Soul, Shadow Bolt, or Incinerate when you want to, when you need to, in order to get the maximum out of that damage. Plus, this ability looks visually impressive. I love the way that the spirits of this decimation just fly at the enemy, and it also creates these 3 orbs around your character to signal that, hey, you still have a few more charges of this ability, better min-max them. If you pick the Nectar Lord as a Warlock, you also get an ability to create an Absorb Shield around yourself. Using this ability around enemies will also increase the effectiveness of the Absorb Shield, and using it against elite enemies that are dead near you will make that shield even stronger. For a class like Warlock, you're a pretty tanky spec, and for a tanky spec, it actually doesn't feel that bad to have even more absorption. So even if you don't have the mobility like some of the other Covenants give you, the extra effectiveness in the tanky nature does feel nice to play as a Warlock. So it just feels like you are a little bit less squishy out in the world. I think that's going to be a really good choice, a really good combination, and I feel like it really plays into this whole playstyle that Warlocks have. Draining the souls of the enemies, burning on the fire, barraging them with demons, and then consuming those souls to create a shield to serve them after the enemy has long passed. I just feel like it thematically fits the Warlock playstyle altogether. The final ability is going to be from the Kyrian Covenant for Warlock, called Scouring Tithe. This is an ability on a 40-second cooldown, but that cooldown is very deceptive. It has a fairly short 2-second cast time reduced with haste. What this does is it will do a bunch of arcane damage instantly, and then a fairly big chunk of arcane damage over 18 seconds. So essentially it puts you an extra dot to put up on an enemy. If the enemy dies while Scouring Tithe is on them, then this ability will reward you 5 soul shards. With careful planning, a Warlock may be able to take advantage of those 5 soul shards in order to put up quite a big amounts of damage when it comes to, let's say, dungeon killing an ad, and then dumping all the soul shards into a boss. However, if this ability ticks out and the enemy isn't dead, then the cooldown of Scouring Tithe is refreshed. Essentially, in a long boss fight where it's just you and the boss, Scouring Tithe is a dot that you can maintain at all times on a boss. You will have to recast it every time the dot uptime falls off, but it is a dot that you'll be able to maintain through a majority of the fight. It's an extra damage over time for you to put up on an enemy, and I like the fact that it gives you a backup cooldown if it doesn't kill anything. I also like the ability for it to give you soul shards to give you room to play with ability, whether you want to use it like, let's say, on an ad that's about to die for the soul shards to then use them for the boss or something, or if you just simply want to keep it on the boss at all times for extra single target damage pressure, you could do so as well. I feel like compared to some of the other abilities, this one is one of the least interesting ones. While cool and has a lot of potential, and if the damage is nice, probably might be the best choice overall, it is not as interesting as some of the other ones have. This one is just simply a dot that you can maintain on an enemy, or you can use it on a target that's about to die in order to give you a bunch of soul shards, which can create some plays, but I'm not a huge fan, I gotta be honest. It's a cool ability, but it feels a little too simple for me. It definitely could be used in dungeons, as we talked, could be used in raids, and I guess it could be used in PvP as well, as an extra dot for extra pressure, which could help out Affliction and other specs, or it could be used in order to snap out an enemy who is dropping low, and then using the soul shards to chuck out a bunch of chaos bolts back at your enemies. If you pick Kyrian, the second ability you get is to summon a steward, which is a little owl boy. He will let you change talents, it'll give you an extra vial, which functions like a weaker version of your healthstone, but I guess still, either way, that's going to be a little bit extra survivability. And he will also let you change talents whenever you need him to, or at least he does that right now in the alpha. There's a good chance that might change in the future. Overall, it's not a bad Covenant ability. I like the other ones a little bit better because I feel like there's at least more playmaking with it, but having an extra heal available if you're in trouble or just simply take a lot more damage than everybody else is always nice. Alright, we're taking a look at all the Warlock Covenant abilities. Let's rank them from my favorite to least favorite. When ranking these abilities, I found Decimating Bolt to be super enjoyable to play with. I like the playstyle that it offers when it comes to lining up some big bursts onto an enemy, and overall, just thought it was very cool, very visually pleasing as well. I think it has a lot of potential. Even though it is the one that is more single target focused, which probably will make it a little bit weaker than some of the other ones when it comes to numbers, I still personally preferred it myself. Vent ability looks amazing. I love the randomness effect for it. The damage seemed quite cool, and I just like overall this whole AoE explosion lining up and having it go through multiple enemies thing. I think it gives a little bit extra character to that ability. Soul Rot, I was a huge fan of. I can't say I liked it the least. Actually, I would say that Impending Catastrophe and Soul Rot can share a, let's say, number 2 place, and Scouring Tithe can be number last. Because with Soul Rot, I love this AoE drain life potential. I thought it was really cool. Also a cool looking ability. Scouring Tithe just felt like the most simple ability of all of them available. It's not a bad ability, it's just I thought it was maybe too simple for me. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Which ones did you like most and which ones did you like least? Maybe your list would be different than mine. I'd like to hear from you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.